So here's another fishing analogy. I have certain techniques and lures and stuff that I always end up defaulting to, even though I know I probably shouldn't be that day, but because it worked previously in a certain situation, I have a very fond memory of that, and it's really hard for me to break that bias, right? So with regards to diet and nutrition, some people will go on a keto diet. They'll lose weight because, hey, I didn't feel hungry. And that, I call that tripping their algorithm, right? For whatever reason for them, that was like the thing that worked for them because it felt easy. Some people go on the keto diet and they hate it, right? But these people did it. Same thing with like time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. Some people can fast for 16 hours or 20 hours out of the day and it doesn't bother them, but they just love to have that one real big meal. That makes them feel, in a way, unrestricted. And what I talk about in the book is probably the best diet for you is the one that feels least restrictive, right? But that's different for everybody. For me, the type of diet system that feels least restrictive that I'm biased to is flexible dieting, where I just, hey, here's my protein, here's my carb, here's my fat targets, and I can have whatever I want to hit those. I'm Layne Norton, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
Have you checked out Waypoint TV? I have. It's awesome. I checked it out because I just uploaded a whole bunch of new shows up there, and you can see them, as well as the rest of our entire career on television. Every show we've ever produced is on Waypoint TV for free. Also, tons of other producers. Over 70 different producers have their content up there, short films, all kinds of stuff. And you can find them on Instagram. They're very active on Instagram. WaypointTV.fishing, WaypointTV.boating, WaypointTV.hunting, Waypoint TV. Those are the accounts. Bunch of Instagram accounts. And they're all really good. You can follow me on Instagram, Tom_Rowland. And you can go to the podcast website, TomRowlandPodcast.com. And you can send me an email at podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. Today's guest is a friend, a mutual friend of Blacktip H, Josh Jorgensen, and myself. Josh introduced me to Layne Norton, and I knew we were going to get along, man. We worked out, and then we talked about fitness and nutrition for the rest. Layne just has written 2 books. The latest one just came out. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's been on all kinds of other podcasts. I think he's done a bunch of stuff with Mark Bell. He has a lot of knowledge, like PhD level knowledge, and he's going to share it with us. If you're interested in losing weight, changing the way you eat, you are wondering if this fad diet or that fad diet is good for you or not good for you, or will it work, or which one's better, this one or that one, that's what we talk about. And man, I ask all kinds of questions. I don't think there were any questions that I didn't ask. I got a lot of questions when it comes to fitness and nutrition. I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And usually they leave me with more questions. Everybody's got questions. And you know what? On top of that, it gets so confusing. Something's good for you this week. It's not good for you next week. How do you know? You know what? Layne knows. Layne knows at a PhD level. So we're going to talk about it all right now with Layne Norton. All right, Layne Norton. We just finished a little squat session. Not quite like we had imagined, but it was cool. Belt squats. Never done those before.
Yeah, they're cool. I like that apparatus from Rogue. Rogue, are you listening? Sponsorship, please.
I have lots of Rogue things in my garage.
I don't know. They make great stuff. But we kind of talked about like the injuries I'd had and whatnot. That's a nice piece of equipment because, I mean, basically, unless you have some kind of awful knee injury, you can pretty much still squat, right, and take the load off your lower back. So it's a nice apparatus. So
just so everybody knows, give me a little your background on squatting and weightlifting and your athletic background.
Yeah, so I always introduce myself as one of 2 ways: either a musclehead who's into science or a geek who's into lifting weights. And I go back and forth on which one I'm probably closer to. but I got into weightlifting early in high school because I got picked on a lot. Actually, pretty like emotionally abused by my peers. I would actually go so far as to say, and I was a nerdy kid. I was hyperactive, like really into science and whatnot. So, easy target for kids. And so I started lifting weights as a way to not get bullied and get girls. And it did not do either of those two things. But fortunately, I fell in love with lifting weights. And about the end of I played baseball all through high school. And by my senior year, when that was finished, I was kind of like, I want something to have a goal to move towards. Athletically, I'd always been active. And since baseball was done, and I was a good baseball player, I lettered 3 years, but I didn't really get any looks by any college teams. And I knew as a 5'10" right-handed first baseman that had that wasn't probably going anywhere. So I loved weightlifting, and I said, well, bodybuilding. I actually still remember driving the car home from my last game in high school thinking, okay, on to the next thing. And so I started getting ready for bodybuilding. I went to college for my first year. My roommate was into bodybuilding as well. His name was Carl. And we trained together all through that first year. And I did a show at 19 years old. And now I'm going to date myself, 2001. And this is before you could post your workout on Instagram, so everybody knew it was legit. And won that show, won the teen division, won the novice division, and was just hooked.
Yeah.
I loved lifting, loved training, loved the nutrition aspect of it. And actually, it bled over into my career because that was so this ties back into fishing, actually. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I love sharks. I wanted to be a shark biologist.
Yeah.
So I actually went to Eckerd down here in St. Petersburg, Florida for my undergrad because they had a great marine science program. But at that time, I was really getting into bodybuilding. And my general chemistry professor, Dr. Schnabel, I still remember him saying, Layne, you should do biochemistry. Because then if you want to go to grad school and do marine science, you could still do it. Or you could do nutrition, or you could do anything if you had a degree in biochemistry. He's like, everybody wants to do marine science. There's no jobs for it. Do biochemistry. It's good.
Yeah.
Good.
So why were you interested in sharks? Just because of Jaws and other things, or had you had experience with sharks?
I was a kid growing up in Indiana,
fascinated.
I think there was a shark show on Discovery when I was like 5 years old one time. And I just was like, man, those things are cool, And, I grew up, I fished with Dad. So we did bass fishing, in Indiana. But my grandparents lived in Longboat Key near Sarasota. And I remember going down and getting after freshwater fishing for largemouth bass and then getting into saltwater fishing. Oh man, you're so in heaven, this is easy.
It's very different.
You go out for, largemouth bass. If you're fishing artificial, you might be out all day and not even see one, whereas you go down, if you throw a shrimp on a hook, you're going to get something.
Yeah.
Unless it's really off, but for the most part, you might not catch anything big or worthwhile, but you'll catch something.
Yeah.
So as kids, I loved that, and I just got really interested in the ocean, loved the ocean. I knew I wanted to be near the water. And so that kind of, if colleges sent me letters from anywhere that was north of the Mason-Dixon line, I just threw it away.
Yeah.
I didn't even want to see it, so, so I went to Eckerd and, but did biochemistry as my undergraduate. And by the time I was getting ready to graduate, I'd competed again and loved it. And by that time I knew nutrition was what I wanted to do. So, applied for a PhD program at the University of Illinois. So went back up north. And I got the fortune to work under a guy named Don Layman, who was like this guy is like the godfather of protein. So I wanted to learn about protein. So studied under him, did research for 6 years, published papers, all that kind of jazz, and loved it. And in the meantime, actually started coaching people as well. So
you still have your own career in bodybuilding and lifting at this point, all through your education?
Yeah, so I competed all through bodybuilding. I didn't get into powerlifting until later, ironically. But
So I'm interested, the things that you're learning in college, in your undergraduate and then your graduate degree, are you applying immediately to your training and it's working and it's giving you the edge, and then therefore it gave you more of an interest in the classroom? Is that kind of
so everything I would learn,
fueling the other?
Everything I would learn about. I mean, I used to keep my biochemistry professor in undergraduate school probably 15 minutes after every single class, because everything I just learned about, I wanted to know how to apply to bodybuilding. You know,
did he know that's what you were doing?
Oh yeah, he knew. And I was very lucky to have professors who actually didn't mind that a meathead was in their class.
But I would think that would be super exciting, because you are your own guinea pig. You are trying all of this stuff on yourself and seeing if it works or it doesn't work, or maybe you come up with your own theories that you can ask him about or whatever.
Yeah, no, it was, I loved it. And I love science. Just the scientific process is so cool. And I think I've always been a pretty skeptical person, at least when it comes to claims from people, and I always think about, well, is that really, I don't know, and being in the fitness industry, you have to be skeptical because there's so many claims.
Many.
And it's hard to sift through all the bullshit.
Well, I know, and that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about. And I'm super interested in talking to you because we have a mutual friend, Josh Blacktip H.
Yeah.
And so he told me when I started talking to him about, like, look, you can change the way you feel by what you eat. And he's like, you really need to talk to my friend Layne. I mean, you guys are going to talk for hours.
Is that how you found out about me?
Well, I had known about you before, and then I saw you on his video, and then he was telling me, "Oh, I'll hook you up." In fact, he even watches the show. He would like to do that, and I'm like, "Well, yeah, let's do it," because I'm just like everybody else, except maybe a little different. I don't know. I don't know if I could ever say that I'm like everybody else, because most people think that I'm way over the deep end on most things that I get into. And on other things, I'm completely uninterested. But one of the things that I'm really
that is how the mind of most entrepreneurs and successful people works. It's either completely obsessed or utterly disinterested.
Yeah, I did a podcast with Gregor Gillespie, who's going to fight this weekend in the UFC in Brooklyn, and he's got a tattoo right here that says 1 or 100. And I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "It means I'm either all the way in or all the way out."
Yeah.
In whatever he does. And I was like, I know a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Know a little bit about that. But what I wanted to talk to you about, because you like to fish, there's obviously some things, some commonalities there. But then you're all into training.
Yep.
And I knew that we would have some commonalities there. And you're full-on scientist. Like you really, really know what you're talking about. I tend to want to listen to people that have experience themselves. Like, it's one thing to read a book by somebody and you look at this guy and go, I don't know. That doesn't look like he's following his own medicine, right? Or his own advice. And so you just wrote, you've written 2 books, right?
Yep.
So I read the first one, The Complete Contest Guide, which is all about bodybuilding and getting really super lean for that. But then you write another book recently, which is more for the masses, right? Like Fat Loss for Life.
Yeah. Fat Loss Forever.
Fat Loss Forever.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and the purpose of that is because people have a hugely hard time with this. And there are incredible claims and so many fad diets and so many, I mean, you hear you're supposed to do this thing this week, and then next week you hear, that's the worst thing you could possibly do. And so I think that so many people get, with good intentions, especially like here we are right after the new year, and everybody has really good intentions and they want to improve their physical health and they want to lose weight and they want to regain their mobility and they want to get in better shape. But they get so confused that they end up doing nothing, or they go on this super fad diet for a little bit, only end up to get fatter than they were before.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very confusing. And I'm a person, I listen to hundreds of podcasts. My wife can't believe how many podcasts I listen to about nutrition, diet, exercise. I read books. I'm fascinated with it. I've never had like formal study like you have.
Yeah.
But I'm just fascinated with it. And I'm fascinated with how we can be so sure that this is the way And then just a couple of years later, this is absolutely not the way. It's the worst thing you could possibly do. So that's really what your book is about, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, basically, the first premise of the book is that we don't actually have a weight loss problem. This is the thing that actually blows most people's minds. So the statistics are 6 out of every 7 overweight or obese people will lose a significant amount of body weight in their life.
Yeah.
The problem is that the relapse rates.
Easy
say
for
that
you
3
to say.
times fast, right? The rates of relapse of weight regain are, depending on the statistics you look at, the people who lose weight will regain all of it. 50% to 70% will regain all of it within a year. Within 2 years, it's 85%. Within 3 years, it's 95%. Of those that regain the weight, 1/3 to 2/3 will actually add on more weight than they had before. So we're focusing on the wrong things. Instead of focusing on, I just got to get this weight off, we need to focus on building sustainable habits with people that they can keep it off. Because most people out there who are listening who may be overweight or maybe they just want to lose weight have done it before. But the problem is they have trouble keeping it off, because whatever allows you to lose it, you have to sustain that. Otherwise, you will regain it. So a lot of what my book talks about is not saying, hey, this is the diet you should do. It's saying, hey, this is the behaviors you are going to need to incorporate in order for you to sustain that weight loss. And it shows you how to lose weight. It shows you, everything. And we did a whole chapter debunking fad diets. I mean, you'll hear people out there saying, calories don't matter. It's all about carbs. Calories don't matter. It's all about this. It's all about that. Calories matter. There's a lot of hand waving arguments people make to make it seem like they'll say something like, well, they compared these 2 diets and there were same calories and one group lost more weight. And people will use that to say, so calories don't matter. Well, no, they still matter. It just means that one diet has a little bit better energy, causes a little bit more energy expenditure than another one. So that may be like high protein diets are like that. But it doesn't mean that like protein is energy negative or that like these are free calories. That's not how it works. It just means that you have a little bit better benefit. And I can make a fishing analogy for you. Now, I don't know your answer to this, but I'm going to guess that I think I know what it's going to be, even though we've never talked before. What is the best lure for catching permit?
And that would be, it depends, like so much. That's exactly what you're going to say about a diet. Like, what do I need to do to lose weight? Well,
depends, right? So somebody's up there saying it's carbs. It's carbs. That's the person saying, "Oh, just throw a crankbait, or a soft plastic or something like that." Well, it just depends. What's the tide like? What's the clarity like? How deep are you? Right? Like all that, and then there's probably 80 other factors that also matter too, right? In terms of what you're going to choose on what day. And that's why when people ask me, they say, what do you think about keto? If it allows you to create a caloric deficit and you can stick to that and sustain that, then by all means, you can use that. But the problem is people do these diets and they just think about trying to get the weight off right now. And they don't think about what's going to happen. So any diet you're on, if you're trying to lose weight, you have to ask yourself, can I see myself doing this method of dieting 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 3 years from now? Because otherwise you're gonna relapse. So if you can't see yourself ever eating carbs again, keto might not be for you.
Right. I've seen it so many times where somebody does the things where the food's shipped to you in the mail.
Yeah.
And like, really? Like that's how you're going to do it for the rest of your life. And it works so well because
so much structure.
It is very structured. There are very few choices.
You have to think about it.
All you do is you take this thing and you put it in the microwave and that's what you eat, and you don't eat anything else than that. But then when all of a sudden you look at your credit card bill and you're like, wow, that auto ship's killing me. I think I'm just going to try it on my own. Whoosh, straight up.
And that's one of the big things is if you're doing kind of a set meal plan or you're doing some kind of fad diet where you're just not eating carbs or you're not eating this food or that food, it doesn't teach you anything. You're not learning, right? So one of the things we try to tell people is we really recommend tracking your nutrition intake. Not because we want you to have to weigh out every piece of food for the rest of your life, because that's not sustainable either, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because if you try the most I ever, so I've been to the highest level of academia you can do. I've done a PhD in nutrition. The most I ever learned about nutrition was by tracking my food intake. First time I ever did it, because you understand what's in food. Because so when you say, oh, I would like a high protein food, you know what that is,
Right.
Or a high carb food, or high fiber, or high sugar. You understand what those things are. Like when I talked to my dad years ago, he didn't know that eggs were high in protein, or
What did he think they were?
He thought they were a carb.
A carb. An egg's a carb.
But if you never had talked about this stuff or learned about it, you wouldn't know that.
Right. The only reason I know about it is because there was a time when I got heavier than I wanted to be. And I also wanted to run, and I wanted to run marathons. So I wanted to drop a significant amount of weight and get back in shape. And this was like 23 years ago. And at the time, the fad diet was the zone.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't know what we can talk about.
Which, as far as fad diets are, it's actually not as bad as a lot of them.
Well, I can tell you, I don't know what it does for everybody. I can tell you what it did for me is he has a thing in the back that shows the food and he breaks them down into blocks, right? So it's like, here are the choices of carbohydrates. Here are the choices of fat. Here are the choices of protein. And just like your dad, I'm looking through there going, I didn't realize that was considered a fat. Like, okay, so avocados are fat.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. And so then I start learning a little bit more about the food and where they are, and how I could eat a bowl of broccoli or I could eat half a bagel, and it's going to be the same carbohydrate.
Right.
So that taught me a tremendous amount, and it worked really well for me.
Yep.
And I'm on some variation of that all the time, because I think, well, you need protein, fats, and carbohydrates in pretty much every meal. That's
right.
I don't know.
The difference is that something you have sustained, right?
Yeah.
So you've kept the weight off.
Right.
So most people, they go back to doing what they did beforehand, because they view it as a diet with a start date and an end date. And a lot of diets will say, make it a lifestyle. But then they're a type of diet that's completely unsustainable for a lifestyle.
Well, and let's talk about that for a life. What sustainable means, because you can just tough it out and do basically whatever.
Yeah, you can do it. Anybody can do anything for 12 weeks.
Right. But a lifestyle and sustaining not only means that you can stomach the food and you can find enjoyment out of the food, but if it creates this giant rift in the household, that's not sustainable. Yeah. Like if you are, I don't know, you're going to do the carnivore diet and your wife's a vegan. And every time you bring home 7 pounds of meat, your wife gets mad at you and is like telling you how bad that is. That's probably not sustainable. Maybe that marriage isn't sustainable, but that's probably not something that is going to last real long. Yeah, somebody's going to give.
What people don't realize about food is, I get in this debate a lot with keto zealots. Because everybody says,
zealots.
Yeah, it's like, well, nutrition, I said this on the Rogan podcast, it's replacing religion for a lot of people. Because I think what it is that, so here's another fishing analogy. I have certain techniques and lures and stuff that I always end up defaulting to, even though I know I probably shouldn't be that day, but because it worked previously in a certain situation, I have a very fond memory of that. And it's really hard for me to break that bias, right? So with regards to diet and nutrition, some people will go on a keto diet. They'll lose weight because, hey, I didn't feel hungry. And that I call that tripping their algorithm, right? For whatever reason for them, that was like the thing that worked for them because it felt easy. Some people go on the keto diet and they hate it, right? But these people did it. Same thing with like time restricted eating or intermittent fasting. Some people can fast for 16 hours or 20 hours out of the day and it doesn't bother them, but they just love to have that one real big meal. That makes them feel, in a way, unrestricted. Mm-hmm. And what I talk about in the book is probably the best diet for you is the one that feels least restrictive, right? But that's different for everybody. For me, the type of diet system that feels least restrictive that I'm biased to is flexible dieting, where I just, hey, here's my protein, here's my carb, here's my fat targets. And I can have whatever I want to hit those.
So how would somebody know what those targets are?
Well, that's kind of the book shows that as well. But, basically it walks you through this. And essentially what we try to find out first is what do you maintain on, right? So what are your, what we call maintenance calories? So what are the amount of calories that you can take in per day and basically not change your weight?
Now, is that based upon your activity level and other
based
factors?
on your genetics, your basal metabolic rate, your activity level, type of job you have. But we can get pretty close based on some calculations that are out there. And then, based on what happens once you start eating a certain amount of calories, then you can adjust depending. So, and then we know, okay, if we want to lose a certain amount of weight, that corresponds to a certain amount of calorie deficit. And we can figure out how to figure that out. Once we have calories, then we set protein because protein is the most important macronutrient. It's important for retaining lean body mass. It also is much more satiating than carbohydrate or fat, and it has what we call a higher thermic effect of food. So basically, your body is, in a way, kind of like an internal combustion engine, right? The process of converting gasoline to energy is not 100% efficient. In fact, it's pretty crappy. So you have to put energy into the system to get energy out. Now, you get more out than you put in, but you have to put some in. Food's the same way. Your body has to put energy in to extract energy out of the food you eat. Well, it has to put more energy in to get the calories out of protein than it does carbohydrate or fat. Now, again, protein's not calorie negative. It's still calorie positive, but it just, so for example, the TEF of protein it's depending on the studies you read, it's from about 20 to 30%.
What's TEF?
Thermic effect of food. Sorry. So 20 to 30% of the energy in protein is getting wasted. Wasted, which actually is a good thing for fat loss. You want to waste energy. You want to be the 1975 Suburban that can go 2 miles on a gallon. You don't want to be the Prius that can go 80 miles on a gallon, right? So we set protein first, and there's a whole table in the book talking about that and everything. The old, what we hear in weightlifting circles, they say 1 gram per pound. And it's not a bad place to start. It probably doesn't need to be that high for most people. But more is not going to hurt you. I mean, even up to intakes of, 1.4, 1.5 grams per pound of body weight have been studied, and they haven't found any harmful effects with it. So we set that, and then carbohydrates and fats, that actually is pretty flexible. There's a lot of debate out there about, should I cut my carbs? Should I cut my fats? Which works better? There's been 32 studies thus far that have 33 now that have examined diets that were equal in calories and equal in protein, but different in carbohydrate and fat. Most of them show no difference in fat loss. A couple show a little bit better with low carb. Actually, Mord showed, if anything, if you compile the data, there was what's called a meta-analysis, which what they basically do in a meta-analysis is they take a bunch of studies that have similar characteristics and they make certain inclusion criteria. And if the studies meet all the inclusion criteria, they basically compile that data. And so they can take a study. Now, your best study might have, 30, 40 people in it. Now you can have thousands, right? You have thousands of data points. Well, this meta-analysis showed that when you equate calories and protein between diets, if anything, fat restriction does a little bit better for fat loss. I think they showed it was something like an extra 26 grams a day of fat loss, which actually isn't that much. Right. It's not a big difference. So I don't want to, and certainly not more important than what you find sustainable. I actually think low carb is a good option for a lot of people because it's pretty easy to still be able to eat out while eating low carb. It's really hard to eat out and be low fat. Like if you go to a restaurant, you can usually find low carb options. Go to a restaurant and try to find a low fat option. It's pretty tough.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
because there was the whole fad of low fat, and
there were,
and maybe that's gone now. I don't know.
You can still do it. I mean, but you've pretty much got to get chicken or fish.
Yeah.
Tell them no oil, no butter, and then some kind of starch. But so what I tell people in the book is the most important thing is picking something that you feel is sustainable and that you can stick to. So I basically say, as far as your carb and fats, the leftover calories after you set protein, do a ratio that you think is going to be something that you can stick to. Right?
And what do you think that is for most people?
I usually tell people like a ratio of your calories that are remaining. We actually have a table in the book that just shows this. So if people don't want to do all the calculations, they can just go to the table and say, that many calories, that much.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take out the calories from protein, the calories that are remaining, I usually say about 55% of them from carbs and 45% fat, I think is a good start for a lot of people, or even 50-50. I think that's a good start for a lot of people. Some people are going to go lower carb. Some people want to go lower fat. Whatever. Try what you like.
Do you have listings and tables in your book? And you sent it to me yesterday, and I only read the introduction, so I'm sorry I'm not better prepared. But do you have tables in there that show people like what foods belong in carbs, fat, and protein?
No, we don't have that. Which maybe now we need to do that for an amendment of the issue.
Some people don't know. Like your dad thought an egg was a carbohydrate.
No, you're right. So no, probably because my audience that I write to is probably not the beginner level.
Right.
But this book is written so that most people can understand it.
Yeah, but maybe just a card that you could keep on the refrigerator, and you go, these are my choices of protein.
Yeah.
Chicken, fish, beef, lamb, duck, fowl, whatever. Yeah. And this is the carbs, vegetables, all the way down.
There's actually an image floating around online. I think it's better to have. There's like circles because they cross over, right? So you can have like, for example, like Greek yogurt actually is carbs and protein, mostly protein, but some carbs. Beans are carbs and protein. If you had something like salmon, that's fat and protein, so if you have those like overlapping circles, those would be cool. So maybe I'll put that in a new version.
Yeah. Well, the idea of what you're trying to do, I think, is make it as easy as to eliminate all the BS and go with science-based, evidence-based,
which isn't sexy,
right?
Like it's
well, but what happens to so many people, like I say, is they have that they have the desire, but then they, even as simple as you're making it, they go, well, he says to do this, and red meat is good, but I've heard all my life that red meat's not good for you. So now what I do? Well, I guess I'm just going to do what I've been doing.
It's tough. We are all subject to marketing, and at the end of the day, we want to believe that there's an easy solution, right? So like if I wanted to go out and become the best fisherman I possibly could, I need to go out. I need to be going out every single day, and I need to be practicing when I'm not out, tying knots, doing all the other little things, right? It's not like the stuff that makes you successful is not sexy.
Right.
It's the monotonous crap that most people don't want to do, right? It's the same thing for weight loss. The characteristics that we talk about in the book of people who, the 5% who actually keep weight off after they lose it, they do choose a sustainable plan. They self-monitor, so they tend to weigh themselves every day, because that's kind of a self-correcting thing. If you're actually weighing yourself every day and you start seeing that thing go up, you usually self-correct.
Right.
They weigh themselves every day. They don't snack. They eat their meals, and they don't really snack very much. They track their intake through some form of cognitive restraint, whether it's they count calories, they track their macros, they don't eat carbs, they eat in a certain time frame of window. They do some form of cognitive restraint, right? And I think that cognitive restraint is really important. Oh, the other thing is they exercise. Exercise is a huge deal for keeping weight off. You've heard studies come out saying exercise doesn't reduce weight. Have you heard of those? There's actually like the studies where they just have people exercise to lose weight. They aren't real impressive.
Yeah.
Because exercise actually doesn't provide that much of a calorie burn, and here's why. It can, but what happens is you move less the rest of the day. So
that's definitely true sometimes for some people.
Yeah. So we have what's called non-exercise adaptive thermogenesis, NEAT. And that's kind of like fidgeting, right? So you wouldn't think about this, but we actually dissipate a lot of energy throughout the day by just fidgeting, talking, stuff that we don't even think about. Now I hear some people say, "Well, if I want to lose weight, maybe I'll just fidget more." You can't make yourself do it. It's completely subconscious. So what happens is, if you go back, you can actually look at videos when I was getting ready for a bodybuilding contest, because your metabolic rate slows way down when you're getting very lean. I talk slower. I even blink slower. Like that's your body trying to conserve you from dying of starvation. But that's a big part of it. So when you exercise, what tends to happen is the body conserves energy by then just lowering your NEAT throughout the rest of the day. So people have used that to say, well, then see, exercise really is an efficient form of weight loss, but that's not the real benefit to exercise with weight loss. The real benefit is it sensitizes you to satiety signals. So there was a study done in the 1950s in Bengali, and they looked at these workers, and they graded them into different quartiles: sedentary, lightly active, moderately active, and heavily active in terms of the labor jobs, right? And what they found was from the lightly active group to the heavily active group, they pretty much, without even thinking about it, matched their intake. So they just kind of linearly increased their calorie consumption if they worked more, right? The sedentary group ate more than both the lightly active and the moderately active group. So what happens is when you're sedentary, you aren't as sensitive to satiety signals. And they've seen this in lab rats as well. So if they have them exercise after weight loss, so they calorie restricted these rats with either exercise or just calorie restriction, and actually found that they didn't lose that much different of weight. But what happened was that the rats that kept exercising versus the sedentary ones kept way more of it off. So exercise, actually, the real benefit, in my opinion, is that it sensitizes you to those satiety signals.
Well, it's going to sensitize you, but isn't there something to, like, if you're a worker, and I don't know what they were doing in this study, but let's just say they were physical laborers. If you're working a shovel, you're obviously not cramming donuts in your mouth, right?
But that's probably part of it too, is a lot of people eat out of boredom.
Right.
A lot of people eat out of boredom.
I do on the boat all the time. God, we're not catching anything. Let's eat.
Yeah,
we can
that's
at
right.
least eat something.
You get into a big school or something. Like I know one day I was out there and I probably didn't eat for 12 hours because I'm not kidding you, between amberjack, yellowtail, mangrove snapper, I probably caught 40 or 45, and
so you're catching fish, plus you got fish slime all over
right.
you. Now it's like, am I really going to eat a sandwich now? Let's just keep catching, we'll eat on the way home.
Exactly.
But eating out of boredom is 100%. It's never more evident to me than on the boat. It's like, you're just sitting there and you're like, well, I guess we could eat a sandwich. Maybe if we ate something, it would, something would change,
That's that old fishing lore,
And you almost use it as like, well, you know what we really need to do is sit here until the tide changes and see if anything happens. But that's like 30 minutes. What are we going to do for 30 minutes? Just stare at each other? Like, let's eat something. And so it's going to be a lunch at 11 o'clock, and you eat your sandwich at 11 o'clock.
I'm going to ask you a question. Do you have any, like, totally ridiculous things that you do just because you feel like it's part of your routine? It might help you catch fish?
Yeah, and it got me super in trouble with my weight. So I used to, somehow, somewhere along the line, someone brought a pack of Nutter Butters on the boat, and we caught fish, really good fish. And so I would go into the store, I was just with the king of no bananas this morning. Bouncer Smith. He will cut the tag out of your underwear if he sees that if he thinks that you're wearing Fruit of the Loom.
That's so funny.
He says that he is actually responsible for the banana disappearing off of the Fruit of the Loom logo, because the guy, the man, Mr. Fruit of the Loom, went fishing with him, and
no kidding,
he's like, "Who's wearing Fruit of the Loom underwear? We got to get that out. It's not working. We're having bad luck." And he's like, "Do you realize I own that?" And he's like, "Well, you ought to tell him to take the banana off the thing." And he's a funny dude anyway, but there's no banana on the logo anymore. But I've never really, I have some friends that believe you should bring a banana every single day. And Anthony Randazzo has probably run 3,000 charters with bananas. I have pictures of him netting redfish with a banana in one hand and a net in the other. So he bucks the trend and goes against.
So he's disproved that theory then.
Yeah.
No basis in science.
Like Michael Scott said, I'm not superstitious. I'm a little stitious.
We all have things we do like that.
Yeah.
I've got certain things I do when I lift.
Yeah,
same thing.
My thing was I would go get these Nutter Butters. And so it was just a little pack, a little 4-pack. And that was fine. And most of the time they would just sit in the cooler and I wouldn't even eat them. But I got so into this that now we started doing it in tournaments. And then Rich was like, well, if a little's good, more's better. So now we get this thing. And so every time we're going by the cooler, we snag a couple of Nutter Butters.
I've never tried Tim Tams.
And then I used to take them and crush them up and throw them in the water, hoping that would do something. I mean, yeah, as a fisherman, especially when you're fishing tournaments and stuff, you do basically anything that you think might work. I mean, it's not going to hurt you, right?
That's right.
Except that when you start eating 48 Nutter Butters a day, that hurts you bad. It's horrible for you.
So people give the same explanation as supplements. They buy into a lot of BS supplements because it's not going to hurt what I'm doing.
Well, is it? I don't know. It hurts some people. Like they get drug tested in the UFC or something, and they had some supplement, and it pops hot for something.
That's usually a contamination issue.
Yeah,
I don't know. I know John Jones. I didn't read about it, but I know he had something happen, and I have not looked into it as much as I should, so I'm probably speaking out of my rear on this. But somebody who I respect as a scientist, he's doing his PhD, broke down why he thinks that he wasn't actually taking anything illegal based on the concentrations they found it in and what the effective dose is and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, but you're responsible for what, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because you're responsible for what goes in your body. So, like I tell people, like I've worked with some collegiate athletes and I've worked with some pros, and man, it's not worth it. Like anything that if it was that good, it's illegal. Trust me,
Yeah, but people with good intentions are doing something that they think, they have a high protein, they need a high protein intake, and they're doing something as simple as taking a protein shake, and it's contaminated with something.
So that's why you buy from. So most professional athletic organizations now have an approved list. So they basically say, if you're using this, you're good, right? We've tested this stuff. You're good. Well, so I tell people,
still get a bad batch, right?
No, not with. If you're, usually the problem is with China. So what'll happen is, in an effort to cut costs, a lot of manufacturers or supplement companies will get their stuff made in China. And what happens is, they're not like, it's not a GMP certified facility. So what'll happen is they'll do a run of pro hormone or a steroid or whatever, and they'll mix it, and then they'll go do protein, but they won't clean the vats afterwards. Right. And so you don't have enough to really make an effective dose, but the traces will wind up because most of these steroids, they're just looking for stuff that shouldn't be there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter the amount that's there. If it's there, you're screwed,
right.
So yeah, I tell people, like, just buy from reputable companies who have NSF certification, or they're in a GMP facility, or they provide lab results, or your organization's approved it, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
But everybody's always looking for that edge, and it's
yeah. Well, it's the edge in everything. It's just we're going back to the superstitions, and I think that I'm not sure how we actually ended up on Nutter Butters and supplements, but
see, I told you I was a little bit like Josh.
Yeah, well, I think we both are. What we were talking about, I think, was back to the dieting and getting people calorically deficient, right?
Yeah, restricted. Yeah. So I think a lot of people get really enthusiastic about the diet they choose, whether it's keto, carnivore, whatever, because they may have tried several diets before that felt very restrictive to them. But somebody like a Chris Bell goes on a carnivore diet, and I've talked to Chris. He's like, I know it's not magic, but I don't ever feel the need to eat anything else. Like, I feel good on it. I don't feel restricted. I can go to a restaurant. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to get. I'm going to get a steak,
right.
And
it's working for him. And then you're going to see that people will.
So then they promote that, but some people take it too far.
Right. Well, yeah, people will take it too far and claim that everyone should be on it.
Yeah.
Right. But what's interesting about that is that people that have no basis in science will go to somebody like him or their friend who's doing the carnivore diet and really enjoying it and doing great, and all kinds of things are happening for them for whatever reason. Maybe it's because they've eliminated other things. Maybe it's because who knows why.
Well,
but their skin cleared up, or they're sleeping better, or something's happening.
Here's the big dirty secret about diets. There was a meta-analysis done a while back looking at different diets, low carb, low fat, high protein, low protein, whatever. But all of them, like all the studies, the inclusion criteria was they had to lose a certain amount of weight. And they looked at their blood markers of health. So what we think of health, cholesterol, HDL, LDL, blood glucose, insulin, all these sorts of things. 95% to 99% of the health benefits of dieting was simply because of the weight loss. Period. Didn't matter what diet they used. So
the blood markers stayed the same.
No, they all improved.
Right.
So, for example, everybody knows that sugar is terrible for you, right? Like everybody said, well, sugar's...
No, everybody knows that.
So, well, most people, you ask them, sugar's bad for you. And the idea is that, sugar, if you, like from the stuff you've read, sugar increases inflammation,
sure,
does all this stuff. So there was a study done where they had people in a caloric deficit and they lost weight. And both groups lost the same amount of weight. Calories were the same. One group was eating 10 grams of sugar a day. The other group was eating over 100. They both lost the same amount of weight because they were on the same calories. Calories matter. And but the interesting thing was their blood markers changed. They both improved almost identically. So inflammation improved the same amount. So people said, well, I don't understand. Well, when you look at correlational data or cohort data where they're not matching calories, but they're saying, okay, people who eat more sugar have higher levels of inflammation. Well, that's because they're not drinking 2 Cokes and then saying, well, that was 80 grams of carbohydrate, so I'm going to take that out of the pasta I'm going to eat later. Right. They're drinking that on top of the pasta that they're going to eat later, right? So they're eating more total calories. So the real benefit is really just losing that weight. So one of the things I say in the book is the best weight loss diet for your health is probably the one you can stick to. Now, obviously, you can do some funky things with diet. Like, I don't think carnivore diet's going to kill you today or tomorrow or whatever, but, being very low fiber and only one source of nutrients, I think is probably not the most optimal thing to do for health. However, if that was the only thing somebody could do, if they say, hey, I've tried everything else, this is the only thing that feels sustainable for me, and they're able to lose weight on it, then it's probably healthier than them doing anything else. Because the weight loss is the most important thing. And you get almost all the health benefits of weight loss in like the first 10% of it.
Right.
So if you're 100 pounds overweight, if you just lost 10, 20 pounds and kept it off, you'd probably get most of the health benefits. We saw in our lab in graduate school, it wasn't my research, but I participated on it. We could take people who were type 2 diabetic, and in 3 weeks, every blood marker would be fine, except for HbA1c, because that's a longer term marker.
How would you do that?
Just get them in a caloric deficit, get them to lose weight, get them exercising.
And you can basically shed type 2 diabetes.
I don't want to make a broad sweeping statement because I think that those are usually a bad idea. I think almost anyone who has type 2 diabetes, if you got them to exercise consistently. Now, I don't want to say everyone, but I would say 99% of people, get them to exercise consistently for 6 months, get them to lose 10% of their body weight, and they won't be able to tell that they have type 2 diabetes when they go to the doctor. I would be, and especially if you get them to lose like 20% of their body weight. Or 20%.
Wouldn't someone that was like in that condition be on some sort of a medication for type 2 diabetes?
Sure. Well, like for example, my dad. So my dad, great example. He did a keto diet when he was younger. So I think he was like 45 or something like that. Went on a keto diet, lost 30 pounds, gained back 50. Now he's doing kind of more flexible dieting. So he's just limiting his portion sizes. He's eating all the foods that he likes to eat, but he's limiting his portion sizes, and he doesn't snack anymore, right? So some of the principles I talk about in the book, and he's going for walks. Like he's never going to be a guy that gets in the gym, but he's going for walks every day now. And he's down, I think, 40 pounds.
Wow.
And he doesn't need his diabetes medication anymore.
So when someone says that they don't need their diabetes medicine anymore, is that because they have gone to the doctor and had blood work done?
Right.
And then the doctor says, well, I guess you don't need it. Or do you, I mean, I'm sure that you would never suggest for someone to
I
take
would,
it.
Yeah, definitely do it under, sorry, hopefully I didn't come across that way.
Right.
I'm glad you're clarifying. Yeah, do it under doctor supervision, right? So don't just say, oh, I'm going to exercise and lose some weight and I'll get off my diabetes medication. Right. And obviously I'm talking about type 2 diabetes, not type 1 diabetes, because that's not something that's curable.
Right.
But yeah, like type 2 diabetes where, you produce insulin, but your body's insensitive to it. Yeah, just getting some weight loss and maintaining that weight loss, you'll see a reduction. Now, some doctors will still suggest people stay on like a drug like metformin. Metformin suppresses glucose production by the liver, but actually metformin does a host of other things. It's actually been shown to, I believe there was a study done showing it actually extended lifespan in people, even if they didn't need it. So that seems to be probably has some other benefits that we haven't figured out the mechanism yet as to how it works.
Right.
But, again, if you just exercise and lose weight and keep it off, that's where most of the health benefits come from. Not because you're doing keto and keto is somehow magic, or because you're doing the zone and that's, that has some kind of magic. It's for whatever reason, like you like the zone that clicked for you. Right? Like it must have seemed like it was pretty easy.
Yeah.
Otherwise you wouldn't have kept doing it. Right?
Yeah. I could eat anything I wanted to, anywhere I wanted to.
Because here's the thing. Any diet can work because if you create a deficit, you'll lose weight.
Right.
But how long can you stick to it? And I'm not talking about stick to it for 12 weeks when you've got, okay, well, I'm dieting and I'm planning and I'm doing this. I'm talking about when your kids are back talking you and you got stress at work and you're going through a divorce and all this kind of stuff. Then what can you stick to, right? Because people don't blow their diet when they're eating at home, cooking their own meals and everything's going fine. They blow their diet when they're just so stressed out that you've only got so many spoons.
Or travel.
Right? Exactly. Travel. So, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the stress too. So you've got to find something that feels easy to you. And that's why I think people get so zealous about promoting whatever method worked for them. Because I hear people all the time, oh, I tried everything and keto, man, it just worked for me. But everybody's not like you. And it didn't work because it's magic. It worked because for you, it didn't feel restrictive. Because you said you can have how much protein and fat you want. And it tripped your algorithm. You didn't feel hungry and you were fine. But it's also not everybody. It's not all about hunger. People think it's just because people are too hungry or we just need to satisfy them. There's an easy way to not be hungry. Just go eat a big old bowl of broccoli. Like that, you won't be hungry doing that. You don't need to do keto to do that. Just eat a bunch of volume from vegetables. You won't be hungry. But that's not why people overeat. It's not the only reason why people overeat, right? There's social stuff. There's let me give you an example. When was the last time you went to a social gathering that didn't have food?
Almost never.
Never happens. And if it did happen, you would think it was weird, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody invites you over to your house and you get there and there's no food, be like, you might not be offended, but you might go,
brought something.
It's kind of weird,
I think we were all supposed
to
bring
the food
something.
is it's part of our, our gestalt. It's very ingrained in our culture,
right.
Even right down to the way you raise your kids, clean your plate, right? I'm sure when you grew up, it was, you better clean that whole plate, right?
Yeah, because you're coming out of the. Our grandparents were Depression era, and they're like, look, we'd be gnawing on that bone.
Yeah,
you're gonna eat everything.
We fold our toilet paper, right?
Listen, I went to the Piccadilly cafeteria with my grandfather one day, and up until this day, he was wonderful, super nice. But we went to the Piccadilly, and I don't know if you know what a Piccadilly cafeteria is, but it's a very southern thing, and you go in there, and it's like a long bar.
Yeah.
And when you're a kid, it's a smorgasbord of everything. So I pile my plate this high, and I get 3 desserts and go there. And man, I ate like 3 bites of that. And my grandfather was so mad at me. He was so mad because he was a Depression era person. And he was like, look, We don't waste food like that.
Yeah.
And that was the first time he'd ever gotten mad at me.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me for a while. So there is the clean plate thing.
It's really interesting too. There's this hypothesis of what's called the thrifty gene hypothesis, which is basically our genetics aren't what caused obesity, this obesity crisis, because our genetics didn't change in the last 70 years.
Yeah.
Right. But I liked what my PhD advisor used to say. He said, genetics only loads the gun for obesity, but behavior pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
But basically, our ancestors, the reason they survived was they probably had this slower metabolism compared to other people who died out, because who would die out during famine? It'd be people who were fast metabolisms. Like being lean looks awesome for the beach, but it ain't great for survival, because when famine hits, the fat guy is the one who's going to make it, right? So if you look throughout history, there's actually a series of events that you can point to where similar things. So we had the Depression, we had World War II, obesity starts happening about 10 years later is when it really started increasing in the 1960s, right?
This is so perfect, because that was my next question. Like, why are we so fat? What in the world happened? And you're segueing perfectly into it. So go ahead.
So think about what happened. We went from a time of first off, World War II changed everything. Our whole entire culture changed. We went from basically the brink of, it was doomsday. You know what I mean? Like that was the evil empire coming to take everything, right? So we survived that. And all we cared about was making our kids comfortable, right? So our entire, like, if you've ever met somebody, like our younger listeners might never met somebody from the World War II generation, those are hard people.
Yes.
They lived through the Depression. They lived through World War II. You don't want to fuck with anybody from that era. Like, I still remember my grandfather. I'm pretty sure at 80 years old, he could have taken anyone I knew. You know what I mean? He was just a hard dude. And our entire mentality shifted, but they didn't want that for their kids because they knew how hard it was, right? So everything was about making things easier for them. So they didn't have the hardships that they went through. But hardship makes you grow, you know? So, like, what do we have now? I mean, we have people now who you need safe space because of words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not just we've become physically soft, but we've become mentally soft as well, right? Like you just, now again, I'm not trying to shame people or, you know, I don't want to get into politics or anything like that, but our just entire culture changed. And the food culture, again, we're telling people clean your plates, but we're also saying we don't want you to have to work that heavy manual labor job when you're a kid.
Right.
We want you to have your college taken care of, right? All this kind of stuff. Whereas I know just from, again, this is personal experience, but every hard thing that ever happened in my life made me better. Like that's where I got my most growth from, you know? So I think in an effort to make our lives easier, in a way, we've made our lives harder because now we have these first world problems, right, of obesity. And even we're seeing this weird thing in developing countries where you have a schism like India, where there's a lot of people who are famine and famished, and there's actually a lot of people who are obese too, because they've come from a long lineage of famine, and now all of a sudden in one generation, boom, they have excess. And what happens? They get really fat because they have the same mentality from the famine era, and they're carrying that into an era of surplus. And what you see, I mean, what happened in the 1950s and 60s? Well, sodas, you know, they were around in the 30s and 40s and whatnot, but you have sodas, you have more processed food. Now, again, there's nothing about processed food that inherently makes it evil. I want to make that like really clear. It's just processed food is really palatable. Okay.
Yeah.
So people think carbs are bad. Have you ever tried to eat a plain baked potato by itself?
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Like it's actually the most satiating thing on the planet. Like you will not be hungry afterwards. But what happens when you put it with butter?
Right.
And cinnamon sugar?
Then you could pile all kinds of stuff on top of it.
Easy to eat, right? Put some cheese on there, you know. So it's people, and there's actually a good graphic too. People talk about being sugar addicted. And what do they talk about? They talk about cakes, cookies, all this kind of stuff. Those are actually higher in fat calories than they are sugar. But fat isn't super palatable either. Like an avocado isn't super palatable. I mean, some people like the taste of it.
Mm-hmm.
Where does things become palatable? Fat and sugar.
Right.
Those are the stuff that's hyperpalatable. Well,
Salt.
And salt. Think about back in the 20s, 30s, 40s. If you wanted something like that, you kind of had to bake it.
Right.
And you could go to the lolly shop and get, that kind of candy shop and whatnot, but you had to go. Now, anywhere, it's so accessible, right?
Well, it's so accessible, but then also, maybe I seem like a conspiracy theorist, but I also think that it's absolutely not a conspiracy theorist that even the advertisement of some of these products are, you can't just eat one.
Oh, yeah.
They are working
Snickers
endlessly.
Satisfies. Of course.
To make sure that if you put that on your mouth.
But that's not a conspiracy. That's just good business.
That's right. They want you to finish that bag.
People look at these sugar companies like, oh, they're evil. Okay. Well, I always I'll be a little bit political. I'm a libertarian. And libertarians like the king of conspiracy, right? Like we're way whacked out with by the way, I don't buy into most. Because these companies are made up of people. You know what I mean? It's just like government. Government's made up of people. Yeah, there's bad people, but for the most part, if I go to any demographic, like the fitness industry, I bet there's probably not the same amount of assholes in the fitness industry that there is in the fishing industry, right? It's probably about the same proportion. And I bet government's the same way, maybe a little more assholes. And these companies are probably the same way. But at the end of the day, what is the best way to keep your employees having jobs, being able to turn a profit?
Sell product.
It's to sell product. That's it. I mean,
how do you sell product? You make it taste better.
Right.
You make it able to eat more of it. Instead of the baked potato, now you put stuff on it. Now you can eat 4 baked potatoes.
I think where it borders on unethical is where you have the cigarette industry that actively suppressed things. They bought off people like that.
You don't think that goes on in the food industry?
I'm not going to discount that, but I think there's enough research out there now that we can kind of look and I tell people, I don't think sugar is inherently bad for you, but I think it's a bad idea to eat a lot of it simply because you won't be satisfied, right? If I go eat a bag of Skittles, that's 55 grams of carbohydrate right there. Okay, well that was that big of a portion size,
exactly,
right? So I always explain dieting like a budget, okay? So if I'm somebody who's really active, a lot of muscle mass, fast metabolism, and I can eat 4,000 calories a day and maintain my body weight, that's like a dude making $10 million a year, right? So we know cars are terrible investments. They depreciate. They have horrible resale, right? But if he wants to go out and buy a $500,000 car, sports car, can he do that as long as he still has money to pay his mortgage, he saves for retirement, he takes care of all his responsibilities? Well, hell yeah, he's making $10 million a year. Is it a good idea for somebody who makes $60,000 a year to spend $50,000 on a sports car? Probably not, right? Unless they've really done very well with their budgeting over the course of several years, right? Food is the same way, right? If you're somebody who maintains your body weight on a really high calorie level, you can eat a lot of calories and maintain your weight or even lose weight. I've met people who could lose weight on 4,000 calories a day.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to kill you if you have a bag of Skittles? Hell no. In fact, a lot of people,
Michael Phelps, when all that came out about his diet,
you think
he's
that
eating
dude,
12,000 calories a day.
Let
you
him
think
try
he's doing it in broccoli.
Yeah, let him try to eat clean. I mean, So I actually have a story about that. I coached a guy who he was eating over 700 grams of carbohydrate and 200 grams of fat a day. So he was well up over 5,000 calories. And he came to me and he was like, "Man, Layne, I can't take any more food. I'm so bloated. I just feel awful all the time. I'm so sluggish, lethargic." And I'm like, "Well, what do you eat?" He's eaten only chicken, broccoli, rice, and oatmeal. And his fat source was peanut butter.
So if he's getting 5,000 calories, how does he have time to train? He seems like he would be eating all the time.
Because those foods are not very calorically dense.
Right.
So I said, "Dude, you're eating your fiber intake's 150 to 200 grams of fiber a day right now." I was like, you're literally full of shit. You're literally backed up to your esophagus with shit. So do me a favor, eat some pizza, eat some Pop-Tarts, eat some stuff that's easy to get down, but I want you to hit your macros and your calories, but I want you to eat these things and let me know how you feel. A week later, he's like, "Oh my God, I feel so much better." He actually lost 3 pounds doing that because he just like literally went to the bathroom a few times. He's like, I feel so much better. I feel lighter. I feel less bloated, but now again, this is where that worked for him because of his particular situation. Now let's take a 150-pound woman who's trying to lose weight, who's inactive other than maybe she trains for 45 minutes a day, slow metabolism, and she's on 1,400 calories trying to lose weight. Should she go out and eat Pop-Tarts and pizza because it worked for this guy? Well, hell no, because that's the equivalent of going and buying a $100,000 sports car when you got a $100,000 a year income, right? Like you're going to spend all of it on this little serving that isn't going to satisfy you, and you're just going to be hungry and more likely to overeat. So like that's flexible dieting in a nutshell that I talk about. Even though I can eat whatever I want, it's going to be dictated, like as I get lower in calories, I am going to, by default, choose foods that are more filling. I'll give you an example. My friend, Sohee Lee, she's a great fitness account. Definitely follow her. You guys follow her. She did an experiment where she was going to compete in a bikini competition, and she was going to eat a Snickers every single day, but she was still going to hit her macros and everything. So she actually won her pro card. She became a professional bikini competitor, and had a Snickers every single day before the show. What was interesting was she said, by 2 weeks in, I hated eating the Snickers because I would rather just have a big salad. Like I would rather just be satisfied, like have something with substance, but I had to eat this little bar that wasn't very satisfying. Sorry, Snickers, it doesn't satisfy. And, she's like, I'd rather we just had a big bowl of vegetables or salad or whatever. So if you're doing it right, you're choosing those more nutrient-dense foods by default. The problem in where flexible dieting gets a bad label is people who flexible diet, we love to post pictures of us eating like gummy bears or, pizza or whatever, because it's like, oh, look, we're losing weight and eating this thing, right, that you wouldn't normally eat. It's more about like proof of concept. Yeah. You know what I mean? That there's some people out there who truly believe that you can't eat any sugar and lose weight, or that you can't eat any carbohydrate, or that you can't eat any processed food and lose weight. And that's just not true. It's just, it makes it more difficult because it's less satisfying.
And so what you keep going back to is basically, and I want to read the rest of your book, and I'm going to, but basically it's all about calories.
Well, it's not all about calories, but it is.
It's about hitting these macros in the 3 different categories: protein, fat, and carbohydrates for a total caloric day, right?
It's about creating a caloric deficit to lose weight. That's what it's about. Now, here's what people say. You'll hear people say, well, calories in, calories out has been debunked. It doesn't matter. And you hear all these. That's not true. That's not true. People will say things, they'll use like, for example, there was a recent study that came out by Ludwig's lab at Harvard, and he's one of the big proponents of the carbohydrate insulin model, even though it's been debunked several times now. And they took people who had lost weight, they put them on a maintenance diet with either low carb, low fat, or middle, and they saw that the low carb group had an increase in energy expenditure by about, I think they said like 250 calories a day. Now, first off, there was a lot of problems with this study. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because it's pretty science-y, but the way they measured it was incorrect. And actually, when you go back, there's other researchers who've gone back and run the numbers with the way it should have been done, and there's no difference. But let's assume there was a difference, because I remember somebody tweeted about this and they said, see, this debunks calories in, calories out. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Calories in, calories out, while it sounds simple, is extremely complex in what makes up calories out, because that is your basal metabolic rate. It's your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, your TEF, thermic effective food, and your exercise, right? Like all those things. Now, if one diet is causing you to expend more energy per day, then it's affecting one of those 4 things, and we should be able to measure it. And we can. We have done it before. But it's not magic, right? It doesn't mean that calories don't matter. It just means that some diets, higher protein, higher fiber, cause greater energy expenditure, and they can be advantageous for weight loss. However, if somebody hates eating a high protein diet and they can't sustain it, then maybe it's not for them. because at the end of the day, you can lose fat on a low protein or moderate protein diet. You can. You can just lose a little bit more at the same calorie level with a higher protein diet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think people get confused because they'll hear these things. They go, oh yeah, well, calories don't matter because this study showed that when calories were equal, that this thing did better. No. They still matter. And calories in, calories out is like gravity. It is what is. Like if you lost weight, you were in a calorie deficit. Or people who are on keto will say something like, well, I didn't have to restrict calories and I lost weight. What they mean was they didn't have to count calories and they lost weight.
Right.
But that's not the same thing. You were still restricted.
Yeah.
It just, for whatever reason for you, it didn't feel restrictive. Or people who are doing intermittent fasting, they say, well, I don't restrict calories. You're just not aware that you're doing it.
You just found this lifestyle that you can...
That works for you.
You feel perfectly fine and you're in a calorie deficit and the next thing you know, you're losing weight. Now, one thing that we have talked about a lot are, a set amount of protein and then, toying around with the numbers on the carbs and fats. Yeah. But what about somebody that decides to go vegan or vegetarian and basically maybe that person thinks tofu's gross and so now they're basically eating all vegetables and nuts maybe. So now they're eating mostly carbohydrates and fat and very little protein.
What I would say is there are some decent vegan protein powders out there. And I would look into those for any vegan. Do you
think that when people think that way, that when I know people that have gone vegan or vegetarian, the last thing they're thinking about is making sure that they get their protein intake. They're thinking about, how am I going to make these vegetables into some kind of casserole that I'm going to like?
I think if you're going vegan or vegetarian, you're not doing it because you're wanting to optimize health. Now, all the vegans any vegans who are probably not listening to this podcast, but
pescatarian, maybe.
Pescatarians, yeah. But you're not doing it for optimal health. And I would tell you that if you're doing it for optimal health, you're doing a mistake. Now, I think a plant-based diet is probably very healthy, but with some high-quality animal product in there as well, because high-quality protein comes from animal. But I think that having a diet that's the majority from like lean cuts of meat and plant-based, generally, I'd say that that's probably very healthy because it's very satiating and it's going to cause a caloric deficit and people are going to lose weight, right? So I think that that's a good start for a lot of people. But, just going, and this is the same with anything, right? Like keto zealots, they go crazy over keto and they're like pouring butter in their coffee and like, cooking their bacon and butter. And it's like, no, like you're totally missing the point. So one other thing about that, just side note, people who claim that carbohydrates are the real problem. Why, if that's the case, every single person who does keto should just be ripped beyond, right? Because they're not eating any carbs.
Yeah.
And if carbs are the problem, then
well, some are. Some do go keto and do that. But I've done that. Like my experience is you're coming at it from a scientific. I'm coming at it from a guinea pig. Like I don't know all the science. I don't read all the stuff. But everybody's talking about keto, and I say, what the hell? I'll give it a try for 2 months. Yeah, a month, and I don't try anything for less than a month.
How did you find it?
Well, first of all, I did not follow Mark Daily Apple. Mark, what's his name? Mark. Shoot, I can't remember his last name. Why am I forgetting his last name? Mark's Daily Apple. He was on Joe Rogan and he's a very sensible guy. He was a triathlete and he really believes in keto these days. And he believes that if you are going to do this as an athlete and you're going to keep training, that you should really back off your training, move into this keto very, very slowly, then ramp your training back up. I didn't do that. I just stayed on the exact same training plan and I went keto and I felt like I didn't feel so great for about a week. And then I felt fine. And you know what? I can eat avocados and steak every night. I have no problem with that. I can eat a ribeye and a couple of avocados, and that's one of my favorite meals. So I thought that was great. Now, I was curious as I maintained and I repeated workouts that I do often, and, is this changing? Am I doing better? Am I doing worse? Do I feel better? Am I sleeping more? Am I sleeping less? What do I feel like? How is this treating me? Is this, if I saw great performance enhancements, I would have stuck with it.
Yeah.
Even if I maybe was a little more tired, but I'm killing it in the gym, then I might have done, I did feel like I had some I did feel like I was thinking clearer for whatever reason. I tried it for a month, and then I thought, okay, now I'm going to try the opposite of keto for a month and see what I feel like then. And so I go, back to just basically eating whatever I want to. And I got to say, I may have felt better on keto, but I think that's because I eliminated a lot of crap that I shouldn't have been eating anyway.
Well, the other part that's difficult is we are really terrible at judging and evaluating ourselves.
Yeah.
Placebo is a very real thing. Like if you, there was a study done where they took people that had allergies, and they told them, we are giving you a pill that is going to improve your allergies. They gave them sugar. They gave them a sugar pill, placebo. Not only did the majority report an improvement in their allergies, 30% of them actually had a objectively measurable improvement in their allergies. Mind is a very, very...
Yes, it is.
We used to think about this and this as separate, and that is not how it works. It's all interconnected. If you really believe something, it's more likely that it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So now, again, for science and sorting things out, we don't want that bias, right? But heck, if I was, when I coach people, I tell them this is going to work. There's going to be a huge, you're going to feel better, this and that, because I'm trying to pump them up because I want them in that positive mindset, right? So, that's the same thing. Like if a guy's going to go fight in the UFC, his coaches beforehand aren't telling him,
I don't know if you're good enough for this,
this guy's really tough. It's gonna. I'm kind of 20-80 about whether or not
you're going to win.
What you really
want to watch out for is the knockout.
Yeah,
don't want to get knocked out.
Embarrassed. Yeah. No, they're telling him you're going to destroy this guy.
Right.
You're going to eat him for breakfast. You're going to. That you don't put that doubt in your head because just because you tell yourself, I can lift 500 pounds doesn't mean you can. But if you say I can't do it, then you definitely can't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that placebo. I mean, you'd heard about the cognitive benefits of keto. So whether or not you got them or not,
maybe
you did.
And that's what I hear all the time. It's like, would you want to think better? Well, of course, who wouldn't want to think better?
Yeah.
So I'll do keto.
Yeah.
But, the thing is that when you start your day with a cup of coffee and, a half a stick of butter and MCT oil on top of that, you've got 1,400 calories right there. And then you're going to eat 5 eggs. And then you're going to eat a ribeye for lunch. I mean, do you really think that you're going to lose weight eating like that? I mean, you've just ingested so many calories and so much food that I didn't really expect weight loss.
The people who do really well with it are the people who they feel so satisfied that they don't do that.
Right, and so they live in a caloric deficit easily. Without any problem. It goes back to what you've been saying the whole time. It's perfectly sustainable for that person.
Right.
It fits with their lifestyle. It fits with their family. It fits with their job. It fits with all of these things. And they feel fine with it. And then the weight starts coming off.
Yeah.
And then there they go. So one of the things I wanted to talk about too is you were saying, the head, the mind and the body, how we're starting to realize that that's, there's way more to it. It's the mind can influence the body. The body can influence the mind, but the mind is
everything
super
affects
powerful.
everything.
What do you think the future of medicine and the future of diet and the future of, we are approaching the fattest we've ever been. We are approaching the most unhealthy that I think this country has ever been for a portion of the population. Another portion of the population are freak athletes, like soccer moms that are freaking ripped with 6 packs and you've got part of the population as healthy as it's ever been, so concerned with diet that they're arguing over keto versus zone. I mean, like, no, this is better. I deadlifted way more like this. And so that population is super healthy. This population is super unhealthy. How does medicine incorporate the mind, body, exercise, diet, nutrition? How does that look in the future for you?
I think I'm going to really surprise people with my answer. I don't think anything's going to change. I mean, in terms of
that's surprising.
In terms of how many people are overweight and whatnot, it would take a complete shift in our culture, a complete and utter shift in our culture and how we do things, because we've been trying to eliminate poverty for a long time. There's still poor people. Why? We've spent more money, essentially giving it to the poor. And again, I don't want to get too much into politics, but essentially giving it to the poor or programs for the poor, that sort of thing. Why do we still have poor people? Well, part of it is circumstance. Like if you grow up in a certain community, of course, it's like genetics, right? Like some people are more predisposed to being fatter than others. That's definitely a thing. Some people, they're born and they live in a trailer or they live in a ghetto or whatever. And it's more difficult to get out of that situation. But if you have, I always liked what Dave Ramsey said, broke is a place, poor is a state of mind. We are creating generations of people who don't know how to do things for themselves. We have, how do you build wealth? You earn more than you spend. That's it. And there's people who don't, I mean, yes, you have to have a good income, but there's people who end up being millionaires who make 70, 80 grand a year, 60, sure. 70, 80 grand a year. They just are very diligent. They're hard workers. They have what we call low recency. So they can see into the future and they delay gratification. Man, I think if there's anything that is the biggest predictor of success in the world, it's the ability to delay gratification. Because that honeypot right there, whatever it is, for whatever you're doing, everybody takes that. It's the people who keep doing the monotonous stuff, going down the road, doing whatever they're doing. And with weight loss, that honeypot is fad diet, weight loss pill, that sort of stuff. The monotonous stuff that actually builds results. You know, I've always told people, if you get into exercise, if you get into weightlifting and you don't use that experience to do anything else in your life, man, weightlifting taught me so much. I use that in everything now. Like the mental growth I got from lifting weights and competing at a high level. When I went to Worlds in 2015, like just for me to get there, I had to win nationals. This is in powerlifting. I had to win nationals. I went through a series of injuries, like overcoming those and getting to Worlds and getting second place in the world, setting a squat world record. I got through that and I was kind of like, man, what else could I deal with? Like, what else could I take on? Right? Because when you go through hard stuff and you get through it, and what you find is that any hard thing you go through, as long as you just don't quit or you're not dead, you're going to get through it at some point. It's going to be over. You just got to kind of keep your legs training. Most people don't have that kind of ability to delay gratification. And I think we're seeing it a lot in weight loss. I'm circling this back around to your question, I promise. I think if we don't have a complete shift in our mindset and stop babying people, I think it's going to be hard to get people there. Because what do people say? Well, it's too hard. I don't have time to exercise. No, you got the same 24 hours I have. It's not a priority. Man, that's the most, I forget. I think I had a life coach / therapist who used those words to me one time. She said, never say I don't have time. Say it's not a priority and watch how you change your behavior.
Right.
Because I had said something and I was like, well, this is, most important thing to me right now. And she was like, shut up, Layne. That's not true. She was savage too. Her name's Patty Evans. I'll give her a shout out. She was awesome. Made a huge difference in my life. She was like, you can't say this is your priority if this is what your actions are. You can't reconcile those. Your priorities are where you put your time. So, hey, listen, I get it. If you're a single mom working 3 jobs, maybe exercise isn't your priority. And hey, I'm not going to judge you for that. Your priority is making a living and your kids. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't say that you don't have time. It's just not your priority.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, that's fine. Like, but if you wanted to make it a priority, that means something else is going to have to go, whether it's sleep or one of those jobs or whatever. So I think trying to get people I think the biggest barrier is just mentality. Like when I was on Rogan, he was kind of ranting about discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me disagreed with him a little bit, but part of me was like, nah, he's pretty right.
Well, he was right, and I listened to that. He was right about some things, but he was. I almost disagreed with him a little bit there too, because you were talking about sustainability, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Well, what does that mean, sustainability? Yeah. Like you
just gotta have discipline."
Yeah, well, of course you do have to only have discipline, but I was sitting there like wanting to chime in, going, "Yeah, well, what if it causes a rift at home?
Yeah.
Like, that." There's some fights that you just don't want to fight. And so you could still have the discipline, but you could find a different way. So maybe it's not keto. Maybe it's something else that makes everything work better. That's what I always tell people about fitness and health. It's like, you got to find something that you like to do, but that also has to fit with your family life. Like if what you like to do for fitness is go out and ride your bike for 12 hours, okay, and you get home from work and then you go ride your bike for 12 hours, that's great for you. But your wife and kids are at home and they hadn't seen you all day, and then they don't see you for another 12 hours, and then you sleep only a couple of hours. That's not
that's
the best.
Yeah.
It's not going, something's going to give, and it's probably going to be your family.
I have a friend, her name's Corey Prope. She did a PhD in psychology, and I liked what she said one time at a seminar I put together. She said, willpower is a finite resource. Everybody has a breaking point. Now, people think that you have, or maybe discipline is a better word, but people think, you don't have willpower for your job and then your kids and your wife and your exercise. It's all like the same pot. Like, again, when do things kind of go to crap on diet? It's when you're stressed out in every other area of your life and you don't have time and you're not thinking about it, right? So that's why I always say, pick the dietary strategy that is the easiest for you, because then when shit gets hectic, you're going to be able to still stay disciplined within whatever it is you're doing.
Right.
So I agree with him in that aspect, because at the end of the day, what people really want, they want to, I had, Holly was ranting to me about this, about a client she had who basically did not want to make any lifestyle adjustments, but wanted to lose weight. And Holly's like, well, you're not going to lose weight. Like, how can I keep doing the thing I'm doing right now and get lean? Right. It ain't going to happen.
Well, if it's not happening now, why would not making any changes?
But that's not an inherent thing for most people. When I think I really liked what Eric Thomas said. Do you know him, motivational speaker? He said, when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, that's when we change. And for most people, they just never get to that point. They may be unhappy with the way they look or whatever, but they just can't bring themselves, because change is scary. Change is really hard. I in the last 2 years, I've been through a lot of change in my life. And there is something to be said for your comfort zone. You get into a comfort zone and you're like, okay, well, I know on the other side of that change, it'd be better. But man, that's going to be really hard going through that. But it is better. So, but a lot of people don't have whether it's the drive or the discipline or whatever it is. There's a lot of things that go into this. But I think that, most people I meet who are successful in terms of lifting or business or whatnot, you don't find that they usually have difficulty. If they decide to lose weight, they usually don't have too much difficulty, because they have the experience of what it takes to be successful in one thing and can carry it over into another. That's why where are most people obese? Well, it's in the lower income lower educated areas.
Oh no. Really? Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a much higher obesity rate in like
There
lower
are a lot
income.
of rich fat people.
There are. But my guess is if they made it a priority, they could get out of it and keep it off, because most people don't get rich
But
by
that's
accident.
what it's about. It's about the priority. And but I think that the interesting part about talking to someone like you is that there are a lot of people that want to make it a priority, and then they just get confused. And then that confusion leads to, I'm just going to do the same thing.
Paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, it is.
I had somebody tweet at me yesterday, and they said, I'm really grateful for people like you. Or no, they said, what would you recommend for somebody who's just getting into fitness? Like, how do I separate the BS from the truth? And I said, I feel really bad for you. not as a pity thing, but just, so the whole reason I went and did a PhD, I will tell you exactly the reason. Because I was in undergrad school and I would read a magazine article, because that's all I had for bodybuilding at the time. There was no social media, nothing like that. I read Flex magazine, muscular development, muscle and fitness. This month, carbs are bad. Next month, you got to eat carbs. You want to gain muscle. This month, fat's bad. Next month, you got to eat fat. It was just like, and I'm just like, I need to go sort this stuff out for myself. That was exactly why I did it. Because I wanted to be able to. Now, I didn't do research on all those topics, but by getting into science, when you understand the scientific method, if you're good at one area, usually you can sniff out BS in another, because you know the telltale signs. I always tell people, if you're looking for somebody who knows what they're talking about, they don't use a lot of superlatives. They don't say things like best, worst, always, never. They don't usually use that, because everything is context dependent, right?
Yeah.
Like if you heard a fishing guide say, hey, always tie this knot for everything you do, you'd probably be like, well, that guy's full of it, right? Because it depends, right? If you're really good at what you do, you've gone through, again, like everything works, right? So you've had enough experience with fishing that pretty much everything works. But it doesn't work all the time in every situation. There's very specific situations. We were just talking about tarpon fishing, right? Yeah. On one bridge, you use crabs. On another bridge, you use mullet. On another bridge, you use deadbait, right? Because it's very context dependent. That's probably one of the things I love about fishing, is it's like a puzzle.
It is.
You really feel accomplished when you trick a fish.
That's what Scott Walker says. Scott Walker says every day is like a puzzle. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and he worked it out the night before, and then he dropped it all on the floor, and then every morning he's got to find the four corners. That's what he says. And then
really
I put
funny.
The rest of the thing together.
That's really funny.
It's not, fishing is good like that. Like weightlifting is too. Golf is another one where there are a lot of metaphors for life. There's a lot of things that you can learn in the gym, on the boat, in sport, that translate to life, and a lot of those are discipline oriented, and I think that weight loss is discipline oriented. But I think that someone like you, who is really trying to use science and to try and really doing your best to cut through the BS and simplify it for someone, is really doing a big service to a lot of people. And that service is obviously, when you walk around anywhere, obviously needed.
Yeah. Well, that's why, again, like people think, I feel like I almost should have gotten a psychology degree, to be honest, instead of a nutrition, because I think the real problem is mostly up here, and not so much. People worry about getting the right amount of protein, right amount of carbs, but people don't not lose weight because they didn't have the right protein, carb, and fat ratio. They lose weight because they didn't stick with it. Like most people, it's hard to, if you're not quitting at something, it's hard to not get it eventually.
Yeah.
So I guess if I was going to speak to people out there who are frustrated, realize that pretty much anything can work. And that's why you're so confused, because everything does work to a certain degree. But find something that works for you, for lack of a better term. Whether that's a lower carb diet, a lower fat diet, or even, I have people, because again, between carbs and fats, it doesn't seem like there's a difference in terms of fat loss when calories are equated, which makes sense because if you look at the thermic effect of carbohydrate and fat, they're pretty close. Protein and fiber are the ones that are different. If I had to put some principles down, I would say, eat in a calorie deficit, numero uno. Well, numero uno is find something that's sustainable. Eat in a calorie deficit. And again, people get confused about this because they'll say, well, I ate in a calorie deficit and I didn't lose weight. If you didn't lose weight, by definition, you were not in a calorie deficit. What they mean is they went online to a calculator somewhere. It told them to eat this many calories. They ate that many calories, didn't lose weight. Well, that doesn't mean that calories in, calories out doesn't work. It just means that calculator was wrong.
Right.
Or maybe your metabolism's slower than usual, that sort of thing. So sustainability, find a calorie deficit. Eat higher protein if you can. Eat higher fiber. Fiber is great for satiety and also a lot of health benefits associated with it. Vegetables, a lot of vegetables. Fruits are great. People will make a big deal about fructose and stuff. I've yet to hear a fat person say, geez, I just cannot stop eating bananas. Or I just can't stop eating apples. If I could just stop eating this mango, that's not what makes people fat. Fruits and vegetables are great. Starches are fine, but again, that carbohydrate and fat, make it whatever works for you. Whether it's low fat, low carb, moderate of each, that's fine. I even have people who I tell them, hey, since, they're like have a more hectic lifestyle, I'll say, hey, since, carbs and fats don't really seem to make a difference, just track your total calories and your protein, if that's easier for you. And for some people that's like, they're like, oh my God, that's because they get stressed out like the OCD types get really stressed out with 3 numbers and trying to make them fit and whatnot,
right.
So you give them 2 numbers and you say, just hit this much protein, this much calories. And they go, oh, okay, that's better. I do think there is something to be said for kind of getting in a rhythm, having kind of the same carbohydrate and fat ratio per day, because your body, as you eat more carbs and less fat or vice versa, your body's going to ramp up the systems that deal with those different energy sources. But at the end of the day, again, sustainability is the most important thing. So, I think that, a good entry for a lot of people who maybe never tracked before is, hey, yeah, just track your calories and just track your protein and try to get, low enough calories to get you in a deficit and, enough protein to get some of those benefits, and try to focus on high fiber foods. And you're going to be 90% of the way there doing that.
Okay. And if they want to get 100% of the way there, tell them how to find your book and all of the stuff that you can do. And we'll wrap this up because we've been going for an hour and a half.
That surprised me.
How does everybody find you?
Yeah. So my main site where you can find me is biolayne.com, BIOLAYNE. I'm on social media as BioLayne on pretty much everything: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook's facebook.com/Layne Norton. YouTube is BioLayne. And then my store is BioLayne Store. That's where all the books are. If you want to get them in particular, the Fat Loss Forever is howtolosefatforever.com. Yeah, that's it. howtolosefatforever.com. And then the contest prep book, if anybody out there is interested in the competition, is contestprepbook.com. So that's it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate all of the knowledge and helping me with my deadlift.
Yeah, no worries. Hopefully I didn't spider off in too many different directions.
That was perfect.
There's a lot of stuff rattling around up there.
Yeah, I can tell. There's a lot of things going on in there. Yeah. All right, Layne. Thanks, man. Until the next time, we'll see you.
Cool.
I hope you learned a lot from BioLayne. Happy to call him a new friend. And, man, he gave me his number. I'm going to text him all my questions about diet from now on. So watch out, Layne. Here it comes. I got a lot of questions. Even after that discussion, I still have a lot of questions. Okay, send me an email at podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. You can go to the website, tomrowlandpodcast.com, and follow me on Instagram, Tom_Rowland, saltwater_experience. Those are our Instagram accounts. That's the platform that I pay the most attention to. And, if you got suggestions or whatever, that'd be awesome. You can tag us, do whatever you do on Instagram. and I'll do my best to get back to you. All right, I'm going to go watch my diet and make sure that I'm eating properly. I hope you will do the same with all that knowledge we just got from Layne Norton. Check out his books too. All right, see you next week.